Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Big Top. We have before us, we have new parts. My beloved little jug here, one of the ears off of one of these clips broke off and hurt my little jug, and I hope y'all are getting this. And but actually about 300 miles on this. It doesn't look too bad, but it looks like it was probably maybe a little lean, little tiny carburetor, stuff like that, but it still ran good. So it actually pushed my bike to 39 miles an hour. So I really did like it. So I ordered another one, and this is what they sent me. They sent me the right bolts and stuff for this one, but they sent me this jug. Not a bad one. I took the measurements from the skirt down to this and this and this and this. The porting's the same. I love this one so much because the porting was absolutely perfect. The inside of this one resembles a Zenoa jug like we used to use in the RC boats. The transfer ports would transfer towards the back or to the intake side, and as the blowdown and it opens this up, the expansion chamber, pulling the fresh charge out, packing it back in, so it's kind of a swirl loop that it does. And the porting on this one was just beautiful. These are hard little jugs to find. You can look at the, I never touched this. I never did anything to it, nothing. I never touched anything. You can actually tell I never did anything because I didn't even clean that out. The, well actually that was just ultra gray. But it was just perfect. And I just slapped her on that motor right there and ran it 8,000 RPMs, 39 miles an hour. Perfect. This jug here is probably a good jug. You probably have to shave some of this off to get your squash ride, high compression head. It'd be good. I got a new piston for this build because we're gonna rebuild this one completely. We got a brand new crank. And I have this thing, it had dings on it. I couldn't even get this bearing on. I had to file them off. And if you look, and it's got scratches, dings here. I gotta clean all that up. I'm gonna check it for true and all that. I tried to get one that was trued and all that, and I ordered it, and they just couldn't quite get the job done. So it never got here. So I bought this one. The threads on here look like they've been beat up. It's definitely not the best crank I've ever seen. And the only reason I'm not using this one is I don't know if a little piece of that stuff got in there. Everything feels good, but you really are not going to be able to make sure, and I don't want to go through all this work and put in a inferior crank. So it's fairly balanced at this point, but you could just put on just the wrist pin and the bearing, so you kind of see. And once you get the piston and everything on there. So we're gonna balance that out. And these are really hard to get a hold of. I've been trying for a while. And finally, I got one. And to prove a point, a little point here. I did nothing to this jug. Everything is just beautiful on them. That's nice and smooth. The intake is exactly the same. It's just a really good little jug. So we're gonna build this proper. Ceramic bearings, everything new. The squash on it was, I think, 25, which is good. And a little discussion on how to measure the squash on a motor, and it gouged the piston up a little bit. And this jug might be usable, but I'm not gonna mess with it. You see this rocking force right here? That's quite a bit. Even when you get it in here, it's gonna rock. So when you measure your squash with solder, make sure you always do it right over the wrist pin holes on the side. Don't do it on the front or the back of the piston. Nobody picked that up when I did it. Always do it over this, because this is not going to flex this way because of the wrist pin and the bearing, but it will flex this way because the wrist pin and the bearing will let it move. So always check your squash if it's with solder on the sides, here or here, never here, never here. Okay. So now, and another part of this video I want to do, we're looking at, I'm gonna give you all a look at this expansion chamber that I made that run on the levee with, which was very fun, by the way. It's ugly, but it was a prototype. I took the original pipe that was on there, I cut it in half, made a band, shortened this. I painted it because I wanted to see how hot it would get and how far the heat would travel. And I listened to the video several times, seeing if I could hear any kind of a power band, or because that's one of the main things you can put on a two-stroke that's going to give you performance. It's your supercharger or your turbocharger on a two-stroke. I could probably hear a little bit, but not much. So, and I'm stubborn. A lot of people say, hey, just buy a 85 RM, KX, YZ, whatever, expansion chain. That's $300. I'm just stubborn. I bought this. Now, the only reason I did buy this, and I'm gonna adapt it to that, and I'm gonna measure this right here. I had a scooter. And it was a 60, it said 49 and a half, but then whenever you pulled the motor out, it said it was like a 70, or 69 or 68 or something like that cc. It might be the 6680 thing with these, but it did a heck of a job. It pushed this thing twice over what it would normally have run, or normally did run. I use it as a pit bike whenever we used to go RC boat racing. It worked, and it worked really, really well. So I'm gonna adapt this to that header, cut it off, weld it on. I'm gonna do a little better welding job than I did on that one. So I really don't wanna hear any comments about that pipe. It's ugly, I know. The silencer is gonna come off, and I'm gonna run it without a silencer, but I do wanna turn that, I'm gonna cut that loose and turn it so it's shooting away from the bike somewhat, like that one right there. Now that we got that out of the way, that's what we got coming up, and that's what we're gonna do. I'm also going to modify the intake and everything. This motor is coming out of that bike, it's getting bagged and tagged, and we have got I'm gonna do a downdraft carburetor set. Just kidding. Okay, I just put this on there to see if it would fit. I mainly wanted this piece for this piece. We're gonna put this carburetor on that bike. If this pipe works for this, then I'm going to build one for that, and that's going in another bike that we're gonna build. And what we're gonna do with that is and this will be looking down on the bike. And this is, and I got a metal brake over there, a plate roll, metal brake and all that. This is looking down on the handlebars. Excuse my drawing. And then the metal main frame right here. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take 18 gauge or 16 gauge and I'm gonna break it into facets. Kind of something like this. And we're going to actually build a tank on it. Underneath the tank, I want to put a recess with a couple of studs in it to hold the coil, or not the coil, but the CDI. That way all wires, cables, everything are going to go through the tubing and be hid. I'm actually going to pull steel tubing, which is not going to be easy. I'm actually going to pull steel tubing through this, then TIG welding it on so there's no structural weakness to the frame. And then that way all the wires and everything will have a conduit for it to go through. And then the CDI unit will come out here into the jug and it'll be pretty much invisible with a cap, fancy cap somehow. We don't really know the theme of the bike yet. We talked about doing an Army bike. We talked about doing a Saints bike. We don't really know about that yet. We've got the bike, we've got wheels. That motor's gonna be on it with this carburetor and that pipe. And it's a 20 millimeter carburetor. And I think that motor will pull this no problem. I got a full set of jets for it and everything else. So that's gonna go on the bike we're gonna build. All this is gonna go on this motor and I'm putting it back on my bike. Now, the real reason, or one of the real reasons for this video is I opened my mouth in the last video saying you could do that work I did with a hacksaw, a file, and some sandpaper. Well, actually, I had to go buy a hacksaw. I didn't own one. I'm looking all over this shop saying, you mean to tell me you don't have a hacksaw? Well, I don't have a hacksaw. So, I'm a proud owner of a hacksaw now. So, we are going to get this out of the way. And I'm gonna tell y'all right now, when I built this thing, this stuff never gets old. I love this thing. Let's get some light over there. I love that. Okay, so this is how I would do it. And let me put a little oil on there just to keep from clogging the blade up with the aluminum. All right. This thing measured out all the way up against this fin would be the head. And I'm just going to score it all the way around. Hugging the top of the top fin. And I'm gonna go all the way around around it, scoring it now around. Naturally, I would put it in, I'd glue a piece in there and put it in a lathe and cut it. And this is a one-piece jug, never be used again. I wouldn't use it anyhow. And if you actually, you know, if you are using a motorized bicycle for your transportation back and forth to work and stuff, I understand money's tight. So some of y'all would probably use this jug, and I completely understand. I'm also going to, a viewer sent me, I can't think of his name right now, and I'm sorry, sent me a link to Wiseco 10mm wrist pin clips like we used to. Those are the style we used to use in RC boats, and we never really had any kind of wrist pin issue. So I ordered a bunch of those. Then I'm just going to continue this process all the way around. I've got a 32 tooth. I even got a fine cut blade, so we'll see what happens. And I'm going all the way around and just scoring and making a channel so the blade doesn't run out. All right, it's pinching the blade now. Okay, that's what we got so far. I would glue a piece of sandpaper on a piece of glass. You don't have to necessarily use a belt sander. This is what I'm gonna use. So, and then you do the same process, cutting this off. And there you go. You could do it. And some sandpaper and a piece of glass, and you could rub this down slowly. If you wanted to do a jug like this, like a YD or something like that, a one-piece jug. And I was wanting to look at something here. Yeah, I don't know if y'all can see that or not. That ring right here, as far as the piston ring would go up. So, let me get that. So you're looking at so that thing was coming pretty much right there at the top. So yeah, that was a good squash in this little jug. This thing was just absolutely perfect. Didn't have to do anything to it, and I didn't do anything to it. Now I got a two-piece jug here now. But anyway, yes, you could do it with a file, clean it up. Now on the YD100, what I did, I cut the very top of the fourth fin right at the top. This thing is missing a fin. So at the 5th fin, I actually cut that off, which I made a mistake in some respects and not in others, because I had the piston coming up a lot higher. I had to dome this because it's actually flat with a little recess for the plug. Not a very good design. That one's domed. This one is not. So if you come down on the 4th, cut it, and then cut the top of the 5th off, you'll pull a sliver about like that. It's kind of, sort of, a little bit thinner than what I got right here, which that is not even 3/16 right there. One guy's making this, oh, one comment, you did this, it's got to be 170. You know, I said, just watch the video, dude. The bike runs good. But I would, I would cut out in between the 4th and 5th, stack a couple gaskets on there. You gotta make a base plate. Things got to run better. So anyway, I'm not telling you all to do that by no means. Don't do anything I say do. Because your bike's liable to run a lot faster. And you might get hurt, so don't do it. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I own a Hacksaw now. And now we have a 2-piece jug, but it could be done. You know, I ran my mouth in saying that, and then the only thing I do is cut all this down flat, sand it down flat, sand that down flat, cut a good copper gasket, and you're done. So hit like and subscribe, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. We're gonna get into this one here on the next video. We're gonna pull it down, clean it up. We're gonna do a proper job for this little jug, because this jug's a good jug. And we're gonna balance the crank, ceramic bearings, the whole 9 yards. We're not gonna use a downdraft carburetor. We're actually gonna use that carburetor, but we're gonna modify the intake on that, and we're gonna modify the carburetor too. And it's a piece of work. But anyway, thumbs up, hit like, subscribe, and thank you all very much for the comments on the last video. They were all great. Please keep them coming. Y'all have a great day.